This video is sponsored by Audible. Wouldn't school be so much easier if you could get through all those tedious reading assignments 3 times faster? Wouldn't it be so much more fun to dive into a good piece of fiction and blast through it in less than a day? Let's talk speed reading. What's going on, guys? Dr. Jubal, MedSchoolInsiders.com. If you've already looked into speed reading, you are probably aware that there are 2 camps of thought. One group of people say that speed reading is this magic, cure-all, everything you ever dreamed of, and more. The other group says speed reading is baloney and does not actually work. As with most things in life, the truth is somewhere in the middle. In approaching speed reading, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the reason I want to read faster? If you want to get through a novel or read for pleasure quicker, that will require one approach. If you want to read through textbooks or research articles and understand hard science quicker, that requires a different approach. Before we jump into the techniques, however, it's critical that we first understand the process of reading in order to have it work in our favor. What is reading? Reading is the processing of text to understand the intended meaning of the piece of writing. Therefore, in order to successfully read, it requires more than just recognizing a series of words, but also understanding the relationships among them and the unstated implications involved in the described situation. Contrast this with skimming, which is a quick consumption of text to get the general idea at a cost of comprehension. Speed reading attempts to maintain skim-like reading speeds with reading-like comprehension. This wouldn't be a Med School Insiders video without getting into the science. The average educated adult reads at approximately 200 to 400 words per minute. Speed readers claim to read thousands of words per minute. In order to do so, they rely on peripheral vision. Acuity is highest in the fovea, which is the center of your visual field, approximately 1 degree in any direction. This amounts to approximately the width of your thumb held out at arm's length. The parafovea has moderate acuity at 1 to 5 degrees from the center, and the periphery is greater than 5 degrees from the center of vision. The bad news is that biologically and physiologically speaking, it is impossible to recognize and interpret text in one's peripheral vision. Try reading by staring at one word and comprehending the surrounding words in your peripheral vision. It's not going to work. Now, try looking at a stationary object like this line. Try to smoothly move your eyes from one side of the line to the other. It's actually physically impossible. Your eyes will move in multiple smaller, jerky movements called saccades. Saccades are quick eye movements that occur while reading, allowing the reader to fixate the fovea on a word. I initially thought that speed readers employ smooth pursuit. This is when your eyes fixate on a moving object and can follow it smoothly, like tracking a target. As you watch this circle moving from one side of the screen to the other, your eyes can actually smoothly pursue it without those jerky saccade movements. However, I learned that the reason speed readers use their finger is less about smooth pursuit and more about keeping a metronomic guide to maintain a rapid pace of reading. Now, saccades allow the fovea to fixate on the next word. Each fixation lasts approximately 250 milliseconds, but this is highly variable based on the legibility of the text, the difficulty, and the task goals, such as proofreading versus reading for comprehension versus skimming. However, not every word is fully fixated on. For example, the word the is skipped about half the time. Just because a word is skipped does not mean that it was not processed at all. Because each reader is unique in terms of timing and sequence of words that he or she needs to look at, speed reading technologies like Rapid Serial Visual Processing, or RSVP, are not effective. These technologies attempt to present each word in the center of the visual field in a rapid progression, eliminating the need for eye movements. Taking into account the aforementioned individual variations, the physiology of visual processing, and the way we comprehend language, I would argue that RSVP is a terribly ineffective method to consume text. Another problem with RSVP is that it does not allow for regressions. Regressions are brief looks backward in text to return to an earlier word. This is important in correcting errors in comprehension. By eliminating the possibility of regressions, RSVP further reduces comprehension. Now, reading and processing language is much more complex than most realize. Take this Stroop task. Try naming the color of the text of each of these words. Not too bad, right? How about this column? Maybe you're marginally slower, but that still wasn't too bad. How about now? It takes much longer to correctly name the color when the word describing the color is mismatched to the color of the text. Let's talk about subvocalization. Many proponents of speed reading claim that subvocalization, which is using your inner speech in your head while reading, will slow you down. A series of studies examined the effects of eliminating or minimizing subvocalization using a variety of techniques. The findings consistently demonstrated decreased comprehension. Given that all writing systems represent words, and given that the primary form of language is vocal, not visual, it makes sense that phonological processing is an important part of reading and comprehension. So what does this all mean? Visual perception occurs quite rapidly. However, linguistic processing is the bottleneck in reading. Multiple studies support the fact that language processing, rather than the ability to control eye movements, is the primary determinant of reading speed. Reading is limited by your ability to identify and understand words rather than our ability to see them. That means reading faster will lead to reduced comprehension. So now that we've clarified the science behind reading and speed reading, let's figure out how to actually read faster. The central idea in reading faster is that one does not need to read the same way for every reading goal. Some will suggest to simply practice reading more as a way to improve one's speed and comprehension. While it does help, it's a very slow and gradual process, not causing any drastic improvements. To more drastically improve speed, we have to reduce comprehension. Conversely, to increase comprehension, we have to read slower. There is no way around that. However, our job then becomes, how do we optimize the balance between reading comprehension and reading speed? How can we reduce comprehension minimally while increasing speed maximally? Here are the techniques that I have found most useful over the years. First, determine the type of reading you will perform and what your goal is. You do not need to maximize comprehension for every reading task. Are you reading a piece of nonfiction for pleasure? Are you proofreading an essay for a friend? Are you reading a textbook for class? Deliberately approaching reading with a goal in mind will help you determine the minimum level of comprehension required and therefore the maximum speed achievable. Second, remember to be flexible with your speed. While reading, there will be segments of text that are easy for you. The language is simple, you understand the concepts, and you're easily able to fly through it. You don't have to stop on every word and understand it deeply. Other sections will introduce new words and new concepts to you, and you will have to slow down to make any sense of it. Understand that this will happen frequently, and you must be flexible with your reading speed to optimize your speed to comprehension balance. The first and last sentences of a paragraph are often the most important, so focus on those if you're unsure about the importance of a paragraph. This is very similar to Cal Newport's pseudo-skimming technique. Next, use a pacer like your finger or a pen. Run your pacer below each line from end to end and have your eyes follow along. This will instantly increase your reading speed with minimum comprehension loss. The key is finding that sweet spot where you are only minimizing your comprehension loss, but you are pushing the limits of your comfort zone. For example, if you reduce your comprehension by 10%, but you gain 50% in speed, that is not a bad trade-off, at least in my opinion. As I stated earlier, there will be sections where you want to move your pacer faster and other sections where you want to move slower. Now, let's talk about specific types of reading. For textbooks, they often have large sections of superfluous text. Don't be afraid to skip these paragraphs or even entire sections. Focus on bolded words and sections that contain key information and slow down on the surrounding text that adds additional context. Another cool tip is pre-reading sections by thumbing through the chapter and looking at section headings, bolded terms, and this will prime you to know what is important. It may take a minute or two at the beginning, but overall you will save time if you execute this properly. My favorite tip for textbooks is after I read a section or a page, I will stop and summarize what I learned. I will do this either out loud to myself or with a friend, or by just writing down a few bullet points. This drastically improves retention. On to books for pleasure. Now, if you're reading for pleasure, you can do whatever you want. If you want to enjoy the nuances of the author's language, then slow down. However, if you just want to get the gist and the overall story, it's not a problem to have your comprehension drop substantially. This very much depends on the book. For some books, I slow down and read every word, and for others, I skip sections. Most books fall somewhere in between. And lastly, let's talk about research articles. When you're reading research articles, which you will have to do plenty of as a pre-med, med student, or a resident, approach them systematically. Read the abstract slowly and carefully, but then determine what is important to have a greater understanding of, and focus your time and energy there. I often read the abstract, quickly go through some of the introduction paragraphs, skim the methods and results section to get just the brief high-yield points, and then I spend most of my time in the conclusion. Another option is to skip reading altogether and opt for audiobooks. My go-to service is Audible. The great thing about Audible and listening to books rather than reading them is that you can free up so much more time to actually consume the book. Ultimately, that's what speed reading is all about. Being able to consume more books, or the same number of books, but much more rapidly. I can listen in the morning while making and eating breakfast. I can listen while driving or while riding my bike. I can listen while stretching or even during a workout. I recently listened to Aziz Ansari's Modern Romance. The best part was that it was narrated by Aziz himself, which makes for a tremendously entertaining and enjoyable listening experience. Audible includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, and more. Go to audible.com/MedSchoolInsiders or text MedSchoolInsiders to 500-500 to get an exclusive 30-day free trial and a book of your choice for free. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you press that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in that next one.